So the French election was this week. Emmanuel Macron was up against Marine Le Pen of the party formerly known as Le Front National, the National Front, but now is Le National Réserve Blanc, which is the National Assembly. And so the French election system works as follows. Essentially, every candidate for the presidency can run in the first round of elections. Now, if anyone gets over 50% of the vote, they automatically win it and become president. But if not, the top two candidates get to go on to the next round. And then it's essentially, you know how that goes. Two candidates, pick one, whatever. So the reason that the French election was interesting, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is there is some level of nuance underneath the electoral results that we see. So even though there is Alexa, stop. Oh my God. Okay. Sorry. My robot was talking to me. So what I'm trying to say is there were some nuances that appear underneath the numbers that you see on top, right? So in the first round, Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron got the two most numbers of votes. However, the amount of votes they got were like 25 and 23%, which wasn't particularly a strong showing by either candidate. And the thing that's interesting about that is Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the kind of French equivalent of Bernie Sanders-ish, came in third with just 22% of the vote. So he was right on the heels. I think it was like 22.1%. But he was right on Le Pen's heels. But if you don't look at that and you just look at who made the final two without looking at the numbers of the remaining candidates, it makes it look like there are only two political camps in France. There are the enlightened centrists, as they were, and the right wing. Now, it's true that the right wing is getting more popular, but if you look at the underlying figures, you can see that the left wing is also getting more popular in France. So what happened in the second round? So in the second round, Emmanuel Macron crushed. He beat Le Pen by double digits. It looked like a crushing victory, which on the surface looks like a mandate for Macron, who is an avowed centrist, okay? However, it's important to note here that Jean-Luc Mélenchon and many other French politicians who ran for the presidency were very careful to say, hey, people who voted for us, I know we didn't win, but whatever you do, don't let Marine Le Pen become president. And because there was this incredible campaign among many of the losing candidates in the first round of the French presidency to quash Le Pen, they were able to actually stop her from winning. Now, many people who voted for Macron actually did not do so because they really wanted to or they liked him, right? They were really just voting against Le Pen, which brings us to an interesting concept that we are all very familiar with here in the United States, which is lesser evilism, right? So the idea, of course, of lesser evilism is that you take a look at two candidates, you think which one of these bastards sucks less, and you vote for the one that sucks less, right? In the US, obviously, the Democrats and Republicans. It is almost impossible for anyone else. In fact, I think it's actually impossible for anyone else who is not associated with either one of those two parties to make it to the presidency of the United States. So, of course, when you get to the ballot box, you see, okay, I can either vote for the Democrat who I don't like, or I can vote for the Republican I don't like. And people make their decisions that way. And of course, there are people out there, just like there are in every system, who genuinely like the two candidates who are given to them. We're not really talking about them for the purpose of this discussion. Lesser evilism is interesting, not just because it is a very obvious people voting against their own direct interests, knowingly so, by the way. This isn't some unknowing version, but lesser evilism actually drives people out of the political process. Now, I'm not sure it would work exactly this way in France, because France actually gives you an opportunity for in the first round for you to potentially have your candidate move forward, right? So there really is more participation. But we saw in the second round of the French presidential election that numbers were actually really, really low. French participation is typically very high, um, but in this election, the French people voted in percentages that you would only really see in the U.S., which is an incredibly small amount compared to normal. And this, of course, belies the constant fact that people don't like lesser evilism, right? And given the option between two bad candidates, there are some people who are going to take the road of lesser evilism and say, hey, look, I need to vote to prevent the bad guy or gal or whoever from coming to power. But there are many people who are going to say, it doesn't matter to me. Whoever gets elected is going to suck anyway. And thus, they drop out of the process. And so I think the significant decline in percentage of individuals who voted in this particular election actually spells out the worry that we have seen that we've experienced in the United States when it comes to lesser evilism, which is the more people you have drop out of the process, the more likely it is that the right wins. And the reason that is the case is because oftentimes the right wing is much more motivated than the left wing to vote in general, but specifically is more motivated to be insurgent candidates. And Le Pen is a rising star in French politics. She does not seem to go away. She will essentially be around forever. Best vote share she has ever gotten. So if lesser evilism continues to play out in France, there's a very real possibility that moderates will start to drop out of the process as well. And of course, the more leftists, the more moderates who drop out of the process makes room to remain in the process because they're very candidate to win. And the thing that was also interesting about the French election that I wanted to bring up that isn't exactly related to lesser evilism is Marine Le Pen had an interesting strategy. So yes, she went with the usual hateful, bigoted stuff. If you're a Muslim, you can't wear a headscarf. Immigrants are bad, yada, 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 racist, yada, 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 right? She went with the usual label. However, she also threw in a little bit of populism. She talked about unions. She talked about bad wages. She talked about the economy. She talked about taxes, taxing the rich. Now, if she got into power, she would never do those things because, like the right wing in the U.S., the right wing in France is funded by, backed by corporations and rich people, and serves primarily corporations and rich people. So it's never going to be the case that Marine Le Pen is actually going to do those types of things, but she will. There are things that she promised that she will do. So, for example, some of the bigoted stuff. Also, trying to pull France out of the EU, which would be devastating for France's economy, devastating for England's economy. So it is actually genuinely important, not just from kind of a virtue signaling perspective, to keep people like Le Pen out of power. Not because shuffling the system is necessarily bad. Oftentimes systems themselves are very bad and they need shuffling. But people like Marine Le Pen are not the people to do it because they are going to shuffle the system, true, but they're not going to shuffle it in favor of the people. They're going to shuffle it in favor of a small elite. By the way, an elite that continues to get smaller, and corporations, of which continue to get larger, but as competition typically gets smaller, right? Because they're buying up their competitors and things like that. Marine Le Pen is dangerous because she knows what she's doing and she knows how to kind of tease in that language that people will respond to. So really, the lesson that Macron needed to have learned from this election, and we will see if he did or not, is he has to look at the entirety of the French population's ideologies and think, what can I do to get enough people to support the system as it is now, or with little tweaks, right? If he's really going to do the enlightened centrism thing, how can I tweak the system just little enough to get people to back away from the right wing? Because the right wing continues to make promises and the center refuses to deliver and lefties are not able to get elected. There's a giant lane open for the right wing. And, the more right-wing nations there are in Europe who start to dismantle the EU from within, like Viktor Orban, like Boris Johnson and his predecessors, the weaker the European Union becomes. And by the way, whether you like the European Union or not, it's done a large number of good things for Europeans. It also has given the most amount of rights and privileges to actual regular everyday Europeans and standardized laws. the European Union has actually been a profound success from an economic perspective. Now, you don't have to love them to acknowledge that, but the truth is, if you create instability, you're not going to help yourselves in the long term. Britain is finding that out. Now, it's entirely possible that Britain bounces back at some point, but they're really struggling right now. Anyway, none of this is relevant to the French election, but it's just important to think about in terms of European politics in general. But it was just kind of interesting that we saw a French election where lesser evilism was certainly a major factor, and it does appear that that dynamic pushed out lots of voters. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.